So it's not on the agenda, but we'll start with Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, so first order of business is approval of the minutes from last month. I know everybody's perused them and read them. Any discussion or comments at this time before we approve the minutes? Okay, I need a motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
Need a second?
Second.
All right, anyone opposed? Okay, that approves the minutes from last month and takes us into old business. Dodie, do you want to set us off, or do you want me to try to get us going? You, if possible.
Sure, just as a recap, we have these 3 parcels to practice on tonight with the scoring of them. So you have the staff report has, the information from staff, and now it's your turn to take the scoring sheets and fill them in, and then one at a time, you'll bring each one up. And I think what we're gonna do when we do this sort of go live, as it were, for real, we will create a spreadsheet that, I can put on the laptop here, and as you vote and pass down, your sheets, then I can put them in, and give you an answer if you want at that meeting, if you don't mind that little kind of delay in the process. Or you can just send them to me and we can discuss them at the next meeting. It's kind of, however you want to do it. And to that point, we're going to create a new scoring sheet for you in Excel this time, so that and we'll put it on the web, so that you can just download a copy whenever you need it, and also use it electronically and fill in the numbers and, save yourself writing and all that. So, let you know as soon as I got that together.
So on these, we're doing 0 to 10, the 2 weighted things. The go, no go into the program, recommendation, not recommendation, is a binary thing, right? Like yes or no. And then the scores just stack them for priority after they're into the program, or is there a cutoff out of the 10 that makes them eligible for the program?
Let me back up and say, you said 10.
That's what the sheet says.
Oh, is the total, right, is the grand total, okay. And I think that's something we kind of have to iron out. Are you going to do your vote, and then I'll add them all up, and then tell you what the number was for each of them? And then are you gonna want to have a kind of a cutoff, like we don't recommend anything below a 7 or, or a 5, or, most parcels aren't going to hit 10, obviously. It's kind of a comfort factor. But we don't have anything in our bylaws that says you have to have a certain score number, let's put it that way. So I think you have some flexibility to decide, and, maybe you want to think about that.
Anybody have any thoughts or comments?
Great question.
There's the first vote, right, which just says we want you to look at it further. The first vote says that we want you to look at it further, right? So that's the one is it the one you're referencing? The binary one?
That's
Okay.
what I was thinking.
Oh, okay.
Because if we could go, like, if we go in and say, this really, there's nothing here off a loose interpretation, it saves you a lot of work of going to do a lot more staff research to put together the 3-page and the maps and the.
Right, well, yeah, so each time we bring them to you, you're gonna be taking a vote whether it moves forward or not. And so the first time I bring you the parcels, when they're the real ones, the next time around, we go from its nomination pool to an eligibility pool. And so you're voting then to send staff back out in the field, so to speak, to get that additional information. And if it doesn't meet that, then it's not moving forward. And then going from, right now, we've got the eligibility pool, and you're deciding whether it becomes an actual priority, goes to the board decision. So hence the more detailed report and your scoring at this point. As you wouldn't be doing that right away at the first blush.
So would the scoring be putting them, the second scoring would be putting them into sort of a ranked order for the board?
Yeah, you can do it that way. You probably, I mean, you could send everything and let them make the decision, and just say, we had these parcels and here's how they turned out, and, kind of pass that on. Or you can say, we just feel like, if it didn't have at least 5 out of 10, then it wasn't,
We didn't put it
good
forward.
enough, and we didn't, vote to move it forward. And they're not, parcels aren't just, thrown out for consideration. They kind of get held, and, it's not a do or die if you don't advance it, to the board, at the meeting that it first comes up. Let's put it that way.
So you're saying it can
So.
get tabled if it's,
Effectively,
Okay.
yes, yeah. Because it might be a case of there's some interest, and then, maybe there's parcels around it that get nominated, and then it becomes a stronger position, something like that. So,
I think definitely something in like anything below a certain threshold, we should say that kind of goes to the no side, because, now that you just said this, I'm thinking, yes, we should have ones or zeros, or, ones or fives, not 2, 3, and 4s on the first go round, because it's really yes or no. It's not so much, well, 3, that's gonna be more the second grading, so I think if we had, maybe a certain number is our go, no-go number, and after that, it's like, we'll move on, yes or no's on those. I don't know what that number is, but I think that's a good idea.
okay.
Part of it too is how many we're chasing, right? Like, if we can't afford to be picky, then maybe a 3's great. Whereas if we can afford to be picky, 7 might be, then, so it's like,
Right,
it's pretty subjective, I think.
yeah.
So that's why, to me, putting this together as a rack and stack, and then maybe that dismissal bar slides based on how many are in the pile. So if we got 30 and we just bell curve it, right? So you drop out, then whatever number gets you a manageable amount of parcels for that application period. And there's no reason the stuff that was applied that didn't make the cut couldn't be brought into the next pool to be re-ranked. It's like, say we get a bunch of 7s in the first round and then a bunch of 3s in the next round. Well, some of those 7s didn't make it. I'm just making up numbers, but
Right, yeah.
does that
Understood.
seem reasonable? I'm just trying to figure out what to do with the numbers.
Right.
And I guess another one I wanted to ask everybody, running through this, how subjective did you feel assigning between a 0 to a 5 was on some of these values? Seemed kind of just picking a number out of the wind, right?
is there any like rubric we could use for numbering and giving them, like you said, it does feel very subjective, so I didn't know if there was a more quantitative measure that,
No, there really isn't, because the rubric is the scoring sheet, and the criteria that are listed. And then your asset is this map and the data that is in that, to try to, narrow it down. And
So I actually found in our files a
Yes.
spreadsheet, so I can send it to you.
oh, great.
And it had some notes that I thought were helpful. It was, it actually went from 1 to 5, so 1 was none. I had been putting zeros, so I had to change them. 2 was less than average, 3 average, 4 more than average, 5 equals high. So it's a little bit of,
Yeah, and some of those, like, endangered species present, it's hard to know an average.
I think that would probably be a yes or no.
Yeah,
I found this to be a great learning opportunity, because some things I couldn't even find, even if all the information that was provided,
Mhm.
and I tried to go to the overlays, and then sometimes the overlays were delayed, and so all of a sudden something is popping up and you don't know you don't know what it was that you clicked. But But yeah, I found it very difficult, very subjective, because some things just, there's no information.
Yeah, like invasive species presence is hard.
Yeah, we,
So I guess the staff report was very helpful in addition to the maps specifically for like T&E and stuff like that, because that was called out specifically on some of the parcels like Bartram's Ixia or whatever. Is that would be typical, right? So species of note or habitat of note would be called out in your narrative section because it's hard to get those on a map.
yeah.
Okay.
Well, staff's not gonna have a different source of information than you do.
Yeah.
We're all using
Other
the same
than
map.
the homeowner maybe says, or the
Or-
landowner, I'm sorry.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. If we
That
get
historic
sort
site
of
nest here or-
inside, information, then we'll bring that into the staff report, certainly.
Okay.
Yeah.
One thing maybe to throw out to the group, and I wouldn't mind taking a first stab, but we could go through each of these and sort of calibrate what a 1, a 3, and a 5 is. So at least we're working off the same numbers. So, like, for example, whether the property has, wells. If it has 0 wells, it's a 1. If it has 3 or more, it's a 3 and 5. So just so we're using the same stuff. Or T&E species, if 1 is present, it's a 2, so we have something to calibrate our numbers. Would that be, I know it would have helped me. Is that something that would help you guys? I see a lot of nods. Okay. I don't
So-
mind taking a stab and sending it to you.
If you would, that would
see
be
what you
great.
think.
Yeah,
Okay.
And if there's no information, or is it gonna be a 0 or a 1?
Apparently ones. I have a lot of zeros, so.
I have a lot of zeros.
Yeah, it would.
So no information, we're gonna put 0.
Yeah, because 0 is a tough number to average. So I will, when I go through, I'll make, I'll say lowest is this, and
Okay.
it's kind of like doing SMART goals for appraisals. I'll take a stab at it. I think that would have helped me a lot. And I can send it to everybody? Is that a thing I can do on the Outlook emails?
send it to me. That way we can, we
Even
just-
better, yeah. And then I guess while I'm hogging the microphone, I did have one other question. So I'd like to understand the aquifer part a little more because it's 2 pretty important ones in the very beginning. And I think I misunderstood, my aquifer knowledge must not be very good. Because for example, I'll use the Raggedy Point one. In the staff write-up, that said that was an important point of aquifer recharge. My understanding of the aquifers, that's not. That's basically the St. Johns River, and within an hour, you're over the clay confining layer of St. Johns County. So how is Raggedy Point a good aquifer recharge area? And I know on the layer it says it's high, but I just don't understand the science behind that.
And I have no clue on the science
Okay.
behind that, honestly. I'm, kind of going based on what the map tells me.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe
Sorry.
I'll look into how the map was made. Because my
Yeah.
understanding of the aquifer recharge area, by the time you hit South Park of Orange Park, there's no infiltration anymore. There's a clay layer all the way out to the ocean.
Okay.
So, okay, anybody else? I've talked way too long.
Matt, I might ask behind me on that question. 1 second. Do you have any additional information or conflicting information? And not on that? Yeah. Okay, all right.
I was honestly just curious.
Yeah.
So I guess talking about what everybody got for these is not terribly helpful because we all did 0s and 1s and some people couldn't get to them. And I will say across the board, I don't know if any of these would have qualified if we're holding a 3-4 value as a thing. Did everybody get pretty low for all theirs? Yeah. Well, at least we're all seeing it the same way.
Good to know.
Yeah, I'm not sure. So I want to share some overarching thoughts, and this is just from my experience as a land manager. And as my wife would say, it's probably not a good time for me to share because I'm tired. But I am going to share with you guys a little bit of my thoughts, and I probably shouldn't because it's on the record. But I think I'm a little frustrated with where we are as a committee, and not on staff side or anything else, but I think there's an overall point. I mean, there's $42 million to be spent here.
there's only so many places to spend it in this county. And honestly, the values that we're looking at, and a realtor can speak more to that, you know, there's only so many acres you can spend it on. And so some of this stuff, wells and preservation and that kind of stuff is all well and good, but it's just so limited, and I feel like we can come up with these rubrics, but at the end of the day, it's gonna be, you know, does Mr. Williams have a viable piece of property with some sort of aquifer recharge? And again, there's nothing on this rubric that has anything to do with value. I mean, they could nominate my office, but they don't have you don't have $500,000 an acre to spend on it, you know, and so and nor does it do what we want to do as far as preserving more green land for the county. And so I just, you know, until we see real properties, you know, again, all of these were low. I mean, maybe the one on Black Creek had some, you know, some value, but most of the uplands were cleared for something, airplane park or something. But I feel like the idea of it seems like we're trying to acquire a fee, and I think that's an unreasonable expectation for this committee to acquire anything fee in this county. We're too far behind. 10 years ago, with $42 million, we probably could have done something. Right now, the price tag is beyond sight. I mean, $42 million, you could have bought a lot, because I saw some transactions happen for that, some large ones, but I don't think you could buy it for $420 million, what was being bought for $42 million. So, and there are some pieces that are certainly available, but I think the conservation easement route is probably more of a thing for us, and I don't see that anywhere. No, and I think partnerships are going to be important. If we could figure out a way to partner with other people who have conservation easement money, then maybe we can get to a value. But I don't feel like there's any, and maybe there is some of that going on, I just don't know about it. And I feel like as part of this process, it's more important. If there's, I don't know, a piece of property that we can partner with 3 different entities and offer the landowner $10,000 to do a conservation easement, then we might be able to preserve something. But none of that's in our matrix or in our makeup. You know, I don't know. I'm a little frustrated, and honestly, being in agriculture, there's not a lot of money. Even our vets who started in agriculture figured out they had to be in residential to make money. And so there's not a lot of money, and there's not a lot of time. And so honestly, ranchers and foresters, we make decisions because we're poor, and we have to make decisions quickly, and this feels like it's taken forever. So, and I get it, it's government, it's a lot of money, we have to answer to the public, but it's frustrating. And, you know, I'm ready to quit cutting bait and go to fishing. So, you know, and these are great, and we have to start somewhere, and I get it, and it's a lot of hard work, and staff has done a lot of work on this, but I'm ready to see something to really sink my teeth in and make a decision on something other than something that's already preserved. So that I can't make a decision until I know what the decision is to be made. And the way I understand it, we're gonna see a first round, and then we're gonna recommend several for you to then bring back to us for a second round to score, right? So the first round, we're not really scoring, it's just yes or no.
Exactly.
Okay, so maybe I'll be less frustrated when I see that. But, and it's a time commitment, and honestly, it's been a whole lot of time,
And you haven't done anything.
hadn't done anything.
I understand.
So I say all that to say, when I went through this, I was like, these are all zeros. All these properties. As far as if they came up, if a property like any of these came before me, I would score them an absolute 0. So, you know, none of them have any value to me.
I was just gonna say, I mean, I understand we have to do the rubric, and I understand that process, why we have to do it. But just reading over these from a layman's perspective, the one that really jumped out to me was the Raggedy Point one, because it was like, one of the main draws when my husband and I were looking at this area 21 years ago was being on the water and having access to the water. And when I read boardwalk into the wetlands would provide a beautiful view of the St. Johns River, I'm like, yes, that's why I moved here. That's what I want. And I think a lot of the residents in Clay County can agree with that. That's a big draw. So again, that's just my layman's perspective. That doesn't have anything to do with a rubric, but just dry reading through this, that's what jumped out at me.
And I think that's what's gonna be our voting point too, is more, it's a personal, that's why we're all in different backgrounds, is to make this personal choice, right? I mean, some people may have different levels of preservation and conservation and backgrounds in it, you know. You guys are in forestry and farmlands, well, you know, I'm in waterway conservation, so for me, there's gonna be a difference of opinion on it, and it's what's gonna make it good. I think that's what'll make us get to a common ground with these.
I guess where I'm going is I feel like when you get them in front of us, it's gonna be pretty intuitive that we're gonna be like, yes, this one needs to be preserved. Now, I realize we have to, because we're a public entity, we have to have some sort of scoring matrix. But I feel like, honestly, I'm gonna be like, yes, this one needs to be preserved 10 when I score it for you guys. So, but until I see it, you know, and again, you want to have a boardwalk and a view of the St. John, and that one surely does have some preservation value. But I just was like, you know, if it wasn't already preserved, acquiring that, you know, what does that cost? You know, and again, that's where, and I know I work in the side where numbers mean everything because we have none. We have no numbers, but you know, the numbers mean more to me than much of anything, because I don't want to spend $42 million for Raggedy Point. So even if it does have a beautiful view of the St. John's, when, you know, we could take that money and maybe do something more with it. So.
So on the matrix, it has the questions about acquisition issues, and I have question marks by each one of those, because there's really no information, as you're saying, for us to make those determinations. I have seen at other counties where the committee like this will score the projects and say, we give you permission to go appraise these, we think they're worthy targets. And then once the staff negotiates those deals, they come back to us with that information, because at that point, if you have signed options, it's not confidential anymore. It comes back to us and we can make a determination then if we think it's worth going forward, you know, on the 1 acre that's 300 million and, you know, whatever. We can make a determination on those options. So that's another idea. I've seen it at other commissions, but yeah, so.
Well, the way our program is set up, that happens at the board level. They have the money part of it.
They would make the
So-
final decision, but we could recommend something. We could say we recommend these to go forward and not those, but they would obviously have the
Well-
final say.
And you are recommending, you know.
With the values, though, we
No.
wouldn't have the values. So that's
Right.
what he was saying. We would, if you added that extra step, which is an extra step, but we would be able to see those and then say, well, we recommend these, move forward. Obviously, the board has final decision. So that's just, I was just saying that that's how other counties do it.
Well, we can, you know, bring that up to the board, and see if they want to, you know, change that. That's a change of the program.
Okay, well,
So we
then
have
I
to,
wouldn't.
the code's kind of written the way it is, so they'd have to make the decision and then tell us, and it'll take several months because we have to go through a code change and,
Okay, so then,
but it's a good point, and so, yeah, I mean,
well, I just experience from other places as I was just
Right.
bringing in, but for these questions though, that's, you know, we don't have information
Yeah.
to make a determination on that. This could be where you put your conservation easement question in. You could get extra points if it's a conservation easement. I
Right.
feel like that's important. But we don't
Yes.
have a question for that.
And it would be very frustrating if we did approve things without knowing the numbers, and that, say, Raggedy Point did get purchased for $40,000, and we also had recommended 4 or 5 others for acquisition, but now we have no money left. I would say,
I guess that's where I'm trying to go is because I have a sneaking suspicion that you're about to lose the interest of the people who will actually know the properties. So, or most of them. And if we don't move forward, because, and the people who will know the property owners and can tell you that you can or can't buy it pretty much, or a value that it would take to buy it, are going to lose interest. And then you'll be in some spiral of recommending. I mean, if Raggedy Point was not preserved already, it would probably be, how many acres in Fleming Island? Oh my God. So, what would that cost right now? So, yeah, but the uplands would be $500,000 an acre. So, so, I mean, I think, and the wetlands have a value too, because you could put them in a mitigation bank or do some sort of, anyway, I'm just saying there's a cost to everything. And I think if we can move forward, we can kind of intuitively come up with that and move past this without having to actually have a value placed in front of us, but we just got to move forward.
I would say, I think it's at least beneficial to have these properties on some type of list. That way, if we don't have the money to purchase it all as a county on our own, we can go, argue for these bigger, acquisition type of programs. Like, I think large scale, like, that's the state's kind of job, like Florida Forever and that type of thing. When I think of this program, I think of like small wins that can accumulate. It's within a certain radius of maybe the, Board of Trustee areas they have laid out for Florida Forever, the Wildlife Corridor, things like that. That's what I was thinking. I don't think it's completely meaningless to kind of look at these smaller properties, because when you say like even these properties you didn't think held any value, like I'm looking at it from a perspective of, this is where the U.S. Fish and Wildlife is about to declare it as, Black Creek crawfish critical habitat. And while there may not be any local sightings there, if it's public property, that means some type of conservation effort can happen there in the future, whether it's a good spot right now or not, and allows for at least some type of progress in the future, that if we don't do anything about it, then there's nothing. So.
Let me ask a question about the money. So I know you say we may not know what they want or what it's gonna, could the realtor give us a valuation of the property in his opinion? Not saying this is what the seller would take, but he thinks this is what this is worth for the ones we're evaluating before we get them?
Could he? Yes. The board, and what I'm thinking about is that when you're negotiating a purchase of something, you kind of want to hold something back. You don't necessarily want to have the dollar amount you're willing to spend or think something's worth publicly provided before you have the opportunity to negotiate. Does that kind of make sense? So I'm not sure if that's something.
Could you do it in a range? Let's say you think it's worth in the ballpark of 500 to 900. That way we're not setting our bottom or top, but maybe somewhere in that ballpark we think it's, without doing a true market analysis, this is what we're.
Kind of an appraisal.
Kind of a ballpark, just saying, hey, this is, it's not gonna be a $50 million property, it's gonna be a $500,000 to $1 million range.
The property
The property appraiser, right now has, for every property, has the taxable value.
Well, that's.
And we all know that that's significantly under
Yeah.
the market value, but it's an equitable ranking between properties, is a comparison of this property versus this property.
Well, could you put that on,
you know.
on our, well, let's do that then. Let's have that on our data sheet when we get our, when you send us the properties we're actually valuing, could we have the taxable
What the-
value is X? That way we at least can see that number and that gives us
Absolutely. Yeah.
a starting point.
Yeah, understanding that it, you know, the actual parcel price is gonna be different, but it gives you some frame of reference. Yeah, we can add that.
Does that seem to help? Does that work for you guys as well? 'Cause, like, so I mean, I'm a numbers guy, you know, and that's what I'm, in my head going, how much is this gonna cost us? And do I wanna pay 20 million for an acre? No. Then no acre's worth it.
It will be helpful to have that number. I agree.
Hey, Dodie, didn't you say there's 7 applicants to look at for this round?
We've received 8 applications. So, yeah, let me just sort of take a second. I was gonna do that at the beginning, or at the end of the meeting anyway. 3 of them, I have the application where the owner has signed it. One is owned by an HOA, technically. The agent for that HOA has signed it, but I've reached out to our legal team to see, do we need additional information? Because just because the president of HOA signs off and, you know, and nominates a property to be acquired, doesn't mean that their whole HOA is aware of all of, you know, and has blessed that transaction. So it's a matter of what additional paperwork do we need before I bring it to you. Then I've got 4 others that are either, it's owned by a trust, another LLC, another one that had more than one owner. So, and because we have the applicant's signature, and in some cases an agent signature, but that's not necessarily the ownership signature, if that makes sense. So I'm in talks with one attorney for one of them, hopefully meeting with him next week. And that one actually may lead to an additional parcel because he mentioned it, that they also have another parcel that's right next to it. So we'll see where that goes. So as soon as we can get all of those worked out, then those will come to you for sure next month. You'd have the 3 where we have the owner's signature right now.
Let's just, to say the 8, generally,
Mhm.
are they, what's the split between full fee and conservation easement?
A lot of them left it blank. Some checked both boxes. And I don't think we might have had one that, you know, was picked one or the other. I can't remember right offhand.
Okay.
Yeah, so.
'Cause I think what Cooper's struggling with, and I think it's been something we struggled with from the beginning, is that ranking a conservation easement against a full fee with this matrix isn't exactly fair. And the intent was to try to get both with that funding. So what we may need to do is sort of pull them aside and send 2 groups up. These are conservation agreements we think that are prioritized, and these are the full fee that are prioritized. Because I understand the frustration, and I understand that we gotta move, but I also think April has a good point, that the reason there's this many of us is because we bring a diverse set of understandings to the table, and we value things differently. And as onerous as matrices are, we have to have something that we can point at to have a number. So, Cooper, in response, I think if we can make this simpler, where you don't have to be so subjective about them, where you can look at them and you say, here's the data, let's just spit the number out, so you're not spending a lot of time. We can whip the numbers out fast and then get to looking at the parcels with the knowledge of what the parcels can do for the county. But I think to say all of them have 0 value is probably an overstatement for some people. So,
I can just tell you from my perspective.
Yeah.
All of those had 0 value, so.
but I do think weighing a conservation easement, all other things being equal, a conservation easement against a full fee with this form, conservation easement lose out 100% of the time. So we might use this form, but be able to split them into different tracks so they're not cross-competing with each other. Because otherwise, all our full fees will stack up on the top of the chart all the way across, I would imagine. There's just not enough place to weigh the value of the financial incentive for a conservation easement. It's got one line, basically, in the lower weighted category of 0.667. Anybody else thoughts?
We value easements. If we prefer easements, we should add a section that it has points for easement value. You know, so we could say if this is a conservation easement, it gets 5. It just matters if we value easements over fee.
Could I ask you, in what, sort of like, what's different, what's missing in the form when you're evaluating fee simple versus easements using that rubric? What part of that changes?
I don't think there's any weight that gets added because it's a conservation easement.
Okay,
So I don't know as it will ever break them out above. Conservation easements are valuable because your money goes farther. So it addresses Cooper's question of, you can't buy anything in this county anymore. So we could do more with conservation easements. It leaves that property on the tax roll, so it continues to produce money for the county. There's benefits to those, and I think, and I'm not for a minute saying we prioritize one or the other. I think we should prioritize them both, and that's why I think they should be on different tracks, so that if we have $42 million, we ought to prioritize a chunk of that to go after the best of the full fee, and an equal chunk of that to go after the best of the conservation easements. So you'll get less return on the conservation easement for half your money, but you'll get twice the land. Then on the other half, you'll buy full fee, which will be less acreage, but it'll be public access and passive recreation and all the costs of burning and management invasives. So
right.
I think it behooves us to diversify our portfolio by separating them preemptively before we're scoring them together. Did that make sense?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely, yeah. We can do that, and I'll make sure that, that if the applicant is, and indicated one way or the other, then, we all know that up front and can separate it a little bit if possible.
And I know we only
So-
recommend to the board, but is everybody kind of comfortable with that sort of recommendation to the board, that we are prioritizing multiple types of acquisition, and here's our best chance for either side, and we'd like similar funding?
Yeah, and internally, we can break that apart. If we know what we're breaking apart, saying, hey, these are our 5, whether they're, because I'm looking at this going, well, I could break a conservation easement down just as good as a one we purchase, with drinking water protections, endangered species, things like that, because that's still gonna be a conservation property. They can't go in and build on it, they can't destroy it, it essentially becomes protected land. So, yeah, I think we'll break it down internally, and I don't know if we need another system in here to weigh it, but I think we'll do it just internally between us.
I actually disagree with you on the conservation easements will score lower, because I think the only thing that they will score lower on is public access, public recreation opportunities. But like management, they get solid 5s because you don't have to do anything to them.
Oh, good point.
Right, that's what I'm saying. I'm looking at this going, I would score a conservation easement high because your animals are protected, your waterways are gonna be protected. It seems to be a pretty good way to, and it's cheap.
Yeah.
Or cheaper.
I think that what he just said is very important, that we keep in mind on this conservation land. We could, I hate to use the term, but we could tie up a lot more properties by using that as our tool, because you can't, there's one thing on here that kept coming back to my mind, and it's down in the management issues, whether the property has not that one, the one below it, whether it will be practical to manage. It may not be practical to manage for the county if they own it, but to that man that's got it right now, that's taking care of it, we can keep it from being developed and it all stays the same and it stays on the tax rolls. That's the importance of that one to me.
And we can have oversight on the property at that point to make sure he is maintaining the property as designed.
Does the county own any conservation easements currently?
That's an excellent question. I am not sure. Caleb, do you know the answer to that? Yeah, okay.
So it would involve some management, because you'd have to come yearly to check it, but
Right.
minimal cost.
Right, yeah.
And we may have already discussed this, but do we know if the conservation is like an indefinite one or like 50 years, 100 years? Like, what's kind of the,
It runs with the land when you do a conservation easement, yeah. So, yeah, it's not something you can take back, if that makes sense. I'm hearing a little hmm
'Cause
over
I've-
here.
I've seen where people do take
Depends on
it
how
back.
every one of them are
Like,
different.
yeah,
It
it
depends on how
requires
it's
like
written up.
mitigation for it, but complicated. It requires
Yeah.
a lot.
Okay. Did we,
I think Cooper's got a great point in that if we start looking at real ones, it makes the process becomes more realistic, and with only 7 or 8 to look at, I mean, it's not like we're swamped.
no, no.
Okay, anybody have any other?
Yeah, I think we said 3 for next time possibly, right? When we do our
Yes.
first essential ground, so that'd be perfect.
Yes.
I think I'm the same way, like, you know, we need to see what we're buying, and then let's get after it, and we're all pretty smart people here. I think we can
Yep.
make a common sense approach to it, and let's get after it and buy some property.
Okay. I have a question for you then. Not for next time because you won't be ranking and doing the scoring sheet till, like 2 probably meetings after that. But when we do get to that point, because that's sort of where you're at now as the practice stage, in your meeting, do you want to bring your sheets and have discussion and then kind of like pass down your scoring sheets and I'll enter them while you're having discussion? Do you want to do them a different way? Just so I kind of know, have you thought about that at all?
I think I would throw out the idea that we could all have our stuff done before the meeting and send her our scores so that you have them in and ready to look at and then discuss. I don't think there's any reason to
That's
pass
perfect.
them and watch you put numbers in.
Yeah, no, that's even better, okay.
Does that seem reasonable to everybody? Be a little more homework on our part, but
Yeah, I mean, the only thing is if someone convinces someone of a purpose, we can obviously make, changes at that point.
Right,
That's
I'd
what my
have the
thought is.
spreadsheet,
I do
and
appreciate the
everybody's numbers.
discussion, but
Yeah.
I understand your point as well.
Right, no, that's good, thank you, we'll do that then, I'll make sure that everybody has the copy, and you can just email them back to me, and I'll have it on the spreadsheet here, and, after discussion, anybody wants to, make any changes, you just kind of like pull down the line, and,
so May will be 3 parcels. That will be the initial discussion. That will just be a simple yes or no.
yes.
Okay.
Yeah, does it meet the conservation goals? That's basically the question.
And then in June would be, I assume, another suite of those. And then follow up on the 3 that are yeses potentially with the full staff report and the scoring and moving forward.
Right, hopefully, we would bring you the remainder in June. And we do have that conservation, organization contract. And so that would give us a little bit of time if we have a kind of a rolling, kind of every other month. So May, you make your first decision for those 3. June, you're looking at the next 3. And in the background, in June, staff is getting, hopefully, not just the additional information, but maybe we can get the consultants to do some of the, additional environmental analysis to have better data for you. And then July, we bring those first 3 back with the added information, and you make that decision, does it go to the board or not?
Okay, so from the point we do the yes, no, whatever suite of numbers that is, it's 60 days before we start looking at this part of it. To make it
If
a
that-
score and take it to the board.
If that works for you?
It's really what works for you guys. I mean, you're the ones doing the work.
It works for staff, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I'm speaking for the rest of us. Are we good with that? Does that sound good? Yep, okay. I'm seeing nods. Okay. That help? I
All
hear
right.
you, by the way. I know. Well, I'm happy that we can say that we're bringing you some next month. Yeah. Now, one last question. Early on in this process, we talked about, y'all wanted to go see the property. And we were trying to decide how that would work and when. And so now I need to know, do you still feel that way, that you want to go out and do boots on the ground to actually see? And are we talking about and when in the process, and not, do you want to see every parcel and?
So I'll take a first swing. My understanding of that discussion was we got to the point where it was too much squeeze for the juice involved on that. I know my personal preference is I would very much like to see stuff that we are potentially ranking highly. Don't need to see all of them. And I don't think we even need to see all of them that moved to this position. But I know at some point we were going to give priority parcels. That maybe we're seeing, but honestly, if you have your consultant go out and they doing some pictures and putting together a presentation, I don't know if it's really needed. That was what my understanding of where we got a couple months ago. Anybody?
I would say if it's a very unique, I think that's a parcel that, like, if it's a unique one that we're like, hey, we gotta check this out. It's gonna be a $30 million parcel. We gotta see why, maybe something like that. But yeah, I think we can do it with pictures and Google Earth, and I think that would be enough.
I agree.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Anybody dissent?
The top, you're saying the top choices.
Maybe.
Maybe.
Depending, okay.
If the pictures don't tell the story.
Yeah, if we're like, hey, we gotta see this one. This is a very unique property, maybe. That's like, I would say that'd be a unicorn property that we possibly go see.
Okay. Well, I will support whatever you want to do, but I will say that that's easier
Yeah.
than coordinating the bus and, everybody's time on a Saturday and, all that kind of thing, and mapping out a route and blah, blah, blah. So the logistics, as we
It
all
seems
know, can
crippling.
get complicated. So, but yes, yeah, I agree.
And I
If
guess we
it's
could go on our-
special, will.
Well, we can't really walk around, but we could drive by the area on our own just to.
Yeah, that you can
kind
do,
of
yeah,
lay
yeah,
eyes on it and see.
And we gotta see what the properties are on. I mean, I don't even know what's coming at us, so,
right.
I mean, if
yeah.
it's magnificent, maybe, but yeah, again, you don't know. Maybe an acre of just grass, and I don't need to see that,
Right. Exactly. Okay.
So that takes us through the old business, theoretically.
You ready? Yes.
What else, Do you have other things for us?
Not really. I mean, my only other thing was to tell you kind of like what was coming and where it stood, and that's kind of what
Okay.
we've covered, so.
I feel like we might have public comment today, so I'll open the floor for public comment. No? Okay.
Okay.
Alibis for anyone up here? Any last comments or concerns? Okay, well, with that, Dodie, I think we're done.
Okay. Oh, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I have a lot to say.
I thought we finally had some public comment.